In the village of Worm Hollow, where the roofs sag like tired shoulders and the roads remember more footsteps than travelers, lived a man made of silence. Elias Granger was 78, though his gait had aged far beyond the number. His spine curled slightly forward as if perpetually bowing to a memory, and his voice was seldom heard, not out of secrecy, but sorrow. He lived in a crooked house at the end of Briar Lane, where ivy clung to the bricks like forgotten fingers. Each morning, before the world had fully woken, he followed the same path through the thinning woods that flanked the town's edge. The leaves, now copper and crimson, spun softly in the wind, drifting around his boots like the last words of summer. There at the edge of the forest stood the tree. It towered above the others. Older, wider, its bark gnarled like ancient knuckles gripping the earth. No one knew what kind of tree it was. Its leaves shifted from green to gold without warning, and birds nested in its branches even through winter. Elias approached it as one might approach an altar. He would stand beneath its crooked limbs, remove his hat, and whisper. Not loud enough to be heard, just enough for the wind to carry his breath away. He told it stories. He confessed his regrets. He said her name over and over again, like a prayer the world had forgotten how to answer. Her name was Marianne. She had died 12 years ago, a sickness that came quickly and stayed too long. The house had never been warm since. Elias never remarried, never traveled, never moved the chair where she used to sit. Instead, he began his quiet ritual, walking to the tree at dawn, speaking low and slow, as if the bark could listen, as if the roots might remember her laugh. The villagers knew of him. They called him the Tree Whisperer when they were kind, Crazy Old Granger when they weren't. Children dared each other to follow him, to listen from behind hedges, to mock the way he bowed to a tree as if it were royalty. He never noticed them, or pretended not to. He spoke only to the tree. One morning, with frost dusting the grass like ghost footprints, Elias placed his palm against the bark. He whispered her name once more, voice brittle, breaking. The wind stirred, leaves shivered. And then it happened. A sound, low, subtle, not the rustle of leaves, not the creak of branches, something deeper. It was as if the tree sighed. Elias froze, pulled his hand back slowly. The forest fell utterly still. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. He looked up, heart thudding. Was it only the wind? Or had someone, truly answered? The morning after the whisper, if it had even been that, Elias said nothing of it. He returned home as always, placed his worn wool cap on the hook by the door, fed the cat that wasn't his but came anyway, and sank into the armchair that still carried a faint perfume of lavender and loss. He chalked it up to the wind, perhaps the ache of old age playing tricks on the senses. But deep inside, something was unsettled, not afraid, just stirring, like a hand gently raking coals in a long-dead fire. The following afternoon, the village square was louder than usual. Teenagers gathered near the bakery, snorting into their phones, nudging one another with the kind of laughter that tries too hard to be cruel. At the center of their amusement was a video, shaky, grainy, but unmistakable, Elias Granger. Standing beneath the old tree, his lips moving in solemn reverence, his eyes closed, his hand pressed against the bark as if in prayer. A mocking voice behind the camera narrated, "And here we have the sacred ritual of Old Man Tree Hugger. Watch closely. Maybe the bark will hug him back." Laughter followed, applause. Someone had added music, circus music, to make it worse. Mason Kendrick, 17, smug and bored, had filmed it 2 days prior. He'd followed Elias into the woods on a dare. Now the video had exploded online, reaching not just the village but neighboring towns. Tree Whisperer became a trending tag. Even adults chuckled behind closed doors. At the grocer's, in the church. The mayor himself was caught grinning when someone played the clip during a town council break. Elias saw it by accident. A flicker on the news screen behind the cafe window. His own bent figure, looped and mocked. A child pointed at him as he passed. The boy's mother scolded him. Too late. Elias heard it, felt it. The laughter wrapped around him like nettles, prickling every part of his skin that still remembered shame. He didn't stop walking, didn't speak, but the next morning he didn't go to the tree. Instead, he sat in his dim living room, hands on his knees, unmoving. The wind outside howled like it had lost something. The cat meowed at the door, then gave up. For the first time in over a decade, Elias missed his morning ritual. That night, as rain tapped against the glass like hesitant knuckles, Elias drifted into a fragile sleep, and in that sleep he heard it again. A voice, not the wind, not memory. It was warm, soft, like someone speaking through tears and candlelight. Elias, it said, a whisper, but not weak, familiar, filled with a love that didn't belong in dreams. He woke with his breath caught in his chest. The room was still, the world silent, but something had spoken, and it had known his name. This was not madness. No, madness feels like unraveling. This felt like being remembered. The next morning, Elias returned to the tree. There was no dramatic moment of decision, no speech in the mirror, no fists clenched with newfound resolve, just the quiet pull of something ancient and aching, calling him back. The forest, still slick from last night's rain, shimmered with morning mist. The sun broke through in quiet slivers, like gold bleeding through torn parchment. Elias stepped onto the path. His cane tapped softly against the roots beneath the leaves. When he reached the clearing, the tree stood waiting, unchanged yet different somehow, taller maybe, or simply more awake. He removed his hat, placed his trembling hand on the bark, and the moment his skin touched the wood, it happened again. Not a voice this time, but a feeling, a bloom of warmth in his chest, like stepping into a memory that still burned. He saw her, Marianne, sitting on the porch in summer, knitting something half-finished. She looked up and smiled at him, and he felt the wind kiss his cheek as she had once done. He blinked and she was gone. But the warmth remained. It was the tree, not speaking in words, no, but showing, remembering. Elias stayed longer that day. He whispered again, uncertain but hopeful. He spoke of the way Marianne used to hum while baking, of the time they danced barefoot in the garden after the rain, of the way she said, "Come home safe," every time he stepped out the door, even when it was only to fetch bread. He spoke like he used to, soft, full of gentleness and grief, and the tree listened. When he finished, its branches rustled not in wind, but in response, a sound that felt like agreement, consolation, remembrance. Over the following days, the connection deepened. Each morning, Elias walked to the tree with purpose. When his hand met the bark, he saw visions now, flickers of light and shadow behind his eyelids. Not just his memories, but older ones. He saw children dancing beneath the tree a century ago, lovers carving initials into its bark, a woman kneeling and planting something at its roots, a sapling, a promise. The tree showed him lifetimes. It was not just old. It was eternal. It remembered everything, and it remembered her. One morning, Elias saw Marianne clearly, not as a dream, but a presence. She stood beneath the tree, her hair caught in the golden wind, smiling with a sadness that said, "I never left." He sank to his knees, tears silently sliding down his cheeks. "Was it you?" he whispered. "All this time?" The tree did not answer, but a branch dipped low, brushing his shoulder like a hand once did. His heart ached and healed at the same time. He began bringing her things, small offerings, a folded letter, her favorite ribbon, a piece of music she once played. Each item he laid at the roots with reverence, and each time, the tree pulsed with life, brighter, stronger. The leaves no longer fell in clusters but danced slowly, deliberately, like they too remembered her. Time blurred. A week, maybe two. Elias no longer noticed the stares, the whispers from afar. The tree was no longer his retreat. It was his companion, his confessor, the last place on earth that still knew how much he had loved her. And one morning, as the sun broke over Worm Hollow and bathed the clearing in a warm, forgiving light, Elias smiled, a true, full smile, the first in 12 years. The laughter did not fade. If anything, it grew louder, fed by the flames of digital cruelty and old-world suspicion. Mason's video had become more than a momentary joke. It had become a symbol. Old Man Granger and his tree was a punchline on talk radio. Children reenacted it on the village green. A mural had even appeared on the wall behind the tavern. A grotesque caricature of Elias hugging the tree while it loomed with googly eyes in a speech bubble that read, "Marry me, Elias?" At first, Elias didn't notice, or chose not to. His days were still spent beneath the tree, which welcomed him like an old friend, albeit more quietly now. But the world beyond the woods was shifting. Fear was afoot, as it always is when people are confronted with what they don't understand. Parents muttered about bad influence. The mayor was flooded with letters. What if he lured children into the woods? What if he thought the tree spoke back and acted on it? The whispers turned to concern. Concern became outrage. And then came the petition. It was written in the brittle language of bureaucracy, but its aim was clear. Elias Granger should be removed from Worm Hollow for his own good and for the village's peace of mind. Mason's mother led the charge. "He's unwell," she said, waving the paper like a badge of compassion. "It's cruel to let him wander. He's alone. He needs supervision." That was the word they clung to. Supervision. When the officials came, two from the city, polite and practiced, Elias was at the tree, as always. They waited on the edge of the clearing, clipboards in hand. One was young and fidgety, the other older, with soft eyes. "Mr. Granger," the older one began, "we're here to help. This situation, it isn't safe anymore." Elias turned slowly. He looked at the red tape wrapped around the base of the tree. It hadn't been there yesterday. "Unsafe tree. Removal approved." He staggered backward as though struck. "No," he breathed. "No, no, you can't." "We're not here to hurt you," the younger one added quickly. "There's a place we can take you. Warm, clean. You'll be cared for." "I am cared for," Elias said, voice shaking. "She cares for me. It cares for me." The men exchanged looks. Behind them, Mason watched with his phone raised again, capturing the old man's final undoing. Elias dropped to his knees before the tree, his palm trembling against the bark. "Please," he whispered, "please don't go quiet. Please don't leave me. Not again." But the tree was still. Its leaves didn't rustle. Its warmth had faded. Where once its bark thrummed with memory, it now felt cold and distant, silent. The men stepped forward. Elias hunched over, shielding the roots with his frail body. "You don't understand," he cried. "This tree, this place, it's hers. It's all I have left of her." "You're confused, sir," the older man said gently. "No," Elias said, and now his voice was thunder. "You're the ones who've forgotten what it means to love something that doesn't make sense to anyone else." But no one listened. To them, he was a delusional relic, clinging to bark and ghosts. That night, Elias sat beneath the tree, head bowed, fingers curled into the roots like a prayer that had run out of words. The forest was colder than it had ever been. The moon, distant and gray. He could leave. Surrender. Let them take him to a place with clocks and medicine and sterilized sympathy. Or he could stay, alone, with a silence that had once felt sacred, but now felt like goodbye. Was it madness to choose the tree over people? Or madness to expect people to ever understand something this old, this deep, this real? He didn't know anymore. It happened before dawn. Chainsaws wailed through the mist like mechanical wolves, their teeth hungry for something older than sin. The tree stood helpless beneath the gray sky as men in hard hats and orange vests surrounded it, muttering, measuring, marking. Red tape fluttered like a wound dressed in denial. When the first blade bit into the bark, it wasn't the sound that broke Elias, it was the smell. Sap poured from the wound like tears, thick, amber, slow. It clung to the trunk in sticky trails, as though the tree were weeping from a place no human had the right to touch. The leaves above shivered, though there was no wind. Something in the forest turned hollow. Wrong, unnatural. Elias screamed. He thrashed as the two officials pulled him back, his cane thrown aside, his fingers clawing at dirt and stone. "You don't understand! You don't understand!" he cried. but his words were drowned by the saw's roar. The older man looked genuinely pained. "I'm sorry, Mr. Granger," he said. "This is for your own good." And then the tranquilizer came. When Elias woke, he was in a bed that smelled of bleach and linen. A white ceiling stared back, lifeless and smooth. He blinked slowly. His tongue was dry. There were no birds here, no roots beneath the floor, no rustling leaves or whispers from wood. Just silence, sterile, indifferent silence. He sat up slowly. His wrists trembled. A tray of food sat untouched beside him. He turned away. The windows were barred, not dramatically. No prison bars, no metal crosshatches, just thick glass that didn't open and curtains that never moved. Beyond them, a parking lot. No soil, no green, just pavement and painted lines that went nowhere. He whispered, first just her name. "Marianne," then other things too. "Are you there? Can you hear me? Please, just once more." But the air here did not listen. It did not remember her. He stopped eating. The nurses came and went, their voices always too bright, their hands always too efficient. "Come now, Mr. Granger," they'd say. "You have to keep your strength up." As if strength had any purpose now. Days passed, or weeks. Time was unmoored. He sat in the corner most hours, his eyes sunken, his hands clutching a worn scrap of paper. A letter he'd once written to her but never sent. Now he read it aloud to the wall. The wall never answered. Then came the final cruelty. The television in the communal room, always tuned to some chirping daytime talk show, flickered to a news report. Ancient tree in Worm Hollow removed after public safety concerns. Roots burned to prevent regrowth. Local authorities confirm no danger remains. No danger remains. The camera panned across blackened soil, ash, a few scorched branches being hauled away like garbage. The clearing was empty now, gutted, silent, stripped of memory. Elias didn't cry. He didn't scream or beg. He just stared at the screen, his eyes wide and unblinking, as though looking through the world rather than at it. His lips moved, just barely, a whisper without a name. Then he turned away from the screen and said nothing more. The days folded into one another, quiet as dust settling in an untouched room. Elias moved little now. He existed more than he lived. A ghost made of bones and breath, anchored only by the stubborn weight of memory. Most of the staff had stopped trying. He refused meals, ignored conversation, stared past the world with the hollow gaze of someone who had already said his final goodbye. But then, one afternoon, something small changed. A nurse, younger than the others, nervous in her kindness, approached him with something clutched to her chest. "Mr. Granger," she said gently, "this came in the post, from someone in Worm Hollow." He didn't look up, so she laid it on the table beside him and left without a word. It sat there, quiet and unassuming. A folded piece of paper, child's drawing, crayon strokes, messy, bold, vibrant. After a while, Elias turned his head, and slowly, as if it were the first movement he'd made in years, he reached out and unfolded it. It was a tree, but not just any tree. Its trunk was wide and gnarled, its branches twisted in familiar curves, but the child had drawn something more. A face smiling warmly from the bark, eyes closed in peace. Beneath the roots, two stick figures held hands. Above them, a crooked sun and the word love written in purple crayon. Elias stared at it for a long, trembling moment, and then, unbidden, fragile, a memory returned. It was autumn, 50 years ago. He and Marianne kneeling in the clearing with dirt under their nails. She held the seedling in her hands like it was holy. "We'll plant it right here," she had whispered, "so that no matter what happens, we'll always be here, always growing." He'd smiled at her then, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Even when we're gone?" "Especially when we're gone," she said, "because love doesn't end, Elias. It roots." Tears slipped down his cheeks. He pressed the drawing to his chest. The tree had never just been a tree. It had been her, their promise, their love made living matter, a vessel for memory, a witness. And love, real love, doesn't vanish with fire. It hides, waits, seeds itself in silence. Elias took a breath, shaky but new. If even one seed remained, just one, it could return. The storm rolled in as if summoned, dark clouds roiling low over the horizon, churning above the old care facility like a bruise in the sky. Rain tapped at the windows, insistent but hollow. Elias sat unmoved in his chair, the child's drawing still tucked in the pocket of his cardigan, like a heartbeat he refused to let die. That evening, as the wind howled through the courtyard trees and the lights flickered once or twice, the young nurse returned. Her face was pale, eyes unsure. "Mr. Granger," she said quietly, shutting the door behind her, as though the world outside might be listening. "There's something I think you should know." Elisa didn't speak. He simply turned, the movement slow, a breath dragged through rust. She sat across from him, pulled something from her bag. A phone. She tapped the screen. "It's from one of the cleanup workers in Worm Hollow. He took this the night they cut it down." The video was grainy, shaking slightly in the dim light of dawn. It showed the clearing, scarred, raw, the tree already half felled. But then, something strange. The roots. They pulsed. Faintly at first, then brighter. Not like fire, like breath. A soft golden glow, threading through the soil like veins. Then the birds. Dozens of them. Robins, crows, sparrows, circling in wide, spiraling rings above the stump. Not panicked, not random. Ritual. And then, silence. The light faded. The birds vanished into the trees. The camera shook. The man filming whispered, "What the hell was that?" The nurse paused the video. "They burned the stump later that day," she said. "But by then, it was already over." She looked at Elias. Her voice softened. "They said it was heat from the machinery or swamp gas. But my grandmother used to tell stories about that tree. Said it was old magic, memory magic. Said it listened." Still, Elias said nothing, but his fingers curled tighter around the edge of the drawing in his pocket. That night he dreamed. But this time, it wasn't a dream. He was in the clearing again, whole, young, no cane, no shaking hands. The tree stood tall and proud before him, untouched by saws or fire. And beneath its arching limbs stood Marianne. She looked just as he remembered, hair silvering at the ends, eyes bright and full of that quiet mischief she always wore like perfume. He took a step toward her. I thought I'd lost you." Her smile broke gently across her face. "You never did." "But the tree," he began. She shook her head. "You weren't talking to a tree, Elias." A pause, her hand rose, touching her chest. "You were talking to me." The wind stirred around them, lifting leaves in lazy spirals. "All those years, I wasn't gone. Not truly. Every laugh we shared, every kiss, every tear you cried into its roots. I was there. We planted love, and it grew into something that remembered." His throat closed. "Then why did it die?" "It didn't," she whispered, stepping closer. "You gave it your heart. So now, it gives something back." She pressed her hand against his chest. Warm, solid, real, and leaned close. "Wake up," Elias gasped. He jerked upright in the bed, the darkness around him suddenly full of breath and meaning. His hand tingled. He looked down. In his palm, a smear of black soil, and resting in the center of it, a single perfect seed. Spring returned to Worm Hollow like a song remembered. Softly at first, then all at once. The wind lost its bite, the sky turned tender, and the woods stirred with quiet breath. Snow melted into the roots of things long buried. And on the edge of the village, where the old path curved into what used to be the clearing, they gathered. Elias had come home. The petition had faded. The officials moved on. There was no parade, no apology. But sometimes silence can be more reverent than noise. Mason stood beside him now, no phone in sight. Just a shovel in hand and a weight in his heart he hadn't known he'd been carrying until it began to lift. The hole was shallow. Elias's knees creaked as he knelt beside it, his hands trembling but sure. He uncurled his fingers, revealing the small, dirt-covered seed. It looked unremarkable. fragile even, but when he placed it in the earth, the wind shifted, as if the forest exhaled. Mason helped cover it, his eyes wet but not blinking. Will it really grow? Elias smiled, the kind of smile that isn't for another person, but for a memory that never left. She'll come back, he said softly, slow as roots, strong as love. They stood there in silence a while longer, and then Elias turned and walked away, cane tapping gently on the earth, like a lullaby trailing behind him. Years passed, the sapling grew, and so did the story. Children came to sit near its base, to listen to tales the wind carried through its new branches. Mason, older now, steadier, tended it like a gardener of the sacred. He told the children not to laugh at trees that whisper, or men who speak to them, because sometimes if you're quiet enough, the world answers. And in front of the tree, a plaque stood in polished stone, weathered but clear. In memory of Elias Granger, the man who remembered. Tourists asked who he was. The children told them. They said he talked to trees. They said one talked back. And every now and then, on the right kind of afternoon, the wind would catch in the leaves just right, and the village would fall quiet, heads tilting, hearts stilling. They laughed when he spoke to the tree. But now the whole village listens. If this story touched your heart, comment, I felt it.